Good morning, everyone. I want to dedicate this talk to a dear friend who has passed out of the body just about 24 hours ago. A Dharma teacher, one whom I've taught with many times, and personally a very good friend, Joe McCormick. Some of you may know of him, Dr. Joe McCormick. Lived in Jefferson City, so he didn't speak from this pulpit that I'm aware of, but he has done retreats in this area, so. Happy trails, Joe. All of the wisdom teachings that can be found within every one of the world's great religions, teachings of the mystics and the poets, the sages, say essentially the same thing, regardless of their cultural or geographic origin. And to sum it up for me in English, I would say that the commonality, the common ground is that, number one, our true nature, our true being is infinite love and peace. That's what and who we really are. That's always there. It cannot not be there. A second teaching is that this nature, the awareness of this nature, is obscured by our identification with the self, a self that's not real, a self that we've been taught, that we've been conditioned to believe is real, the personality, the sense of me in the world, me vis-a-vis you, me vis-a-vis everything. This self, we'll call it ego, typically, is not bad. It's simply not true. It's sort of like a hypnotic state. But that sense of this is me is very deep, deeply connected to that state of me or ego. And in the Buddhist tradition, the Buddha would say this is a delusion. This is a primary delusion, that this is who we are and this is all that we are. It's who we are, just as our car is part of who we are, or our clothing is part of who we are. But it's just the covering, it's not the essential part of who we are. The way that we become free of our identification to this false self is by realizing how we are enmeshed in it, how we are identified with it, in what ways, and what's the payoff for staying identified? What's the payoff for living in a delusion. There's a price we pay, and we'll talk about that later. One of the primary characteristics of this ego with which we are identified is that it is always right. Always. Even when it's wrong, it's right. So paying attention to and becoming aware of this characteristic can be a very powerful, very effective way of disidentifying from it. Not getting rid of it. We don't have to get rid of it. Why? Because it's an illusion. You don't need to get rid of an illusion. We need to simply see that it's an illusion. To try to get rid of an illusion, you make it more real. So let's just pay attention to this idea of being right. Now, I want to point out that being right is important in many ways in terms of our profession, our work. I mean, if you go to a physician, you want a physician that's right. If you take your car to an auto mechanic, you want a mechanic that's right. You want people that know what they're doing. So I'm not talking about that kind of a professional or procedural right. It's quite functional and quite necessary in our culture. I'm talking about that self-righteous right, that right that has that sense of superiority, that right that says anybody that disagrees is wrong. That's very different than simply the right of knowing how to fix a computer or a car or a human body or whatever. So what's the intention for wanting to be right? Well, in one case, it's to serve others. It's to serve out of a sense of professional excellence, being dedicated to our work. The other intention is to be better than anybody else, to be big, recognized, defended, safe. Being right is like being in a castle, So let's look at some of the symptoms of being right. How do I know if I'm addicted to being right? Well, there's a judgmentalism to this right. There's a sense of moral superiority. Victor talked about this last week somewhat, this idea of self-righteousness, which means I'm right and you're wrong. I've got the answer. There's kind of an arrogance to that. So that's one way to look at it, this feeling of being superior, better in some way. There's a rigidity often. Things have to be done the right way, which means my way. Now, there is a right way, but we'll talk about that later. There's a functional right way that works okay. If you're going to learn to play golf, you want to hold the club in the right way and swing it the right way. because that's functional, that serves the purpose. But being right in the sense of being better is a very different story. There's a sense of arrogance, superiority, sometimes safety. I feel safe because I'm right. Very often connected with a sense of being right is kind of a victim identity. The next time you feel like you've been victimized in some way, you get overcharged by the insurance company, or something happens that you're right. But it's like, I'm right, I'm got him. There's a book out, or I think it's still in publication, from many, many years ago, called The Games People Play by Eric Berne. And it identifies all these various games that we play, the ego games are what they are. And he has labels for each one of them. And one of the labels, one of the games is called Nigisab. And it's an acronym for, it stands for, Now I Got You, you SOB. And it's that kind of right that says, okay, now I got you. You overcharged me. You're a crook. And I'm not going to let you off the hook. You see, that's one of the ways we use being right. It's not a simple matter of, well, they made a mistake, but it's more a matter of, you made a mistake, and I'm going to make you pay for it. So there's a certain pleasure in that. And oftentimes when we feel like we've been victimized, there's a kind of a self-righteousness in that victimhood. How dare they do that to me? Somebody hit my car and took off right away. How dare they do that? How wrong they are, how bad they are, how right I am. And then sometimes we generalize that story. The whole world's full of crooks and cheats, and we're right about that, you see. That's why politics is such a hot topic, because we're so addicted to being right to our point of view. Used to be religion, but nobody goes to church anymore, so politics has become our religion, actually. Our sense of rightness, the sort of that used to be my church, my religion is the only right one, the only true one. Some people still say that today, but it's more like my political party is the right one. Same energy, just a different arena. So that victim identity of being right, being righteous, we pay a price for that. The payoff is being right. And when you notice that, don't judge yourself. Just notice the pleasure you get from it. Because that's what keeps us in there. That juicy little payoff. And just notice the next time something comes up and everybody's guessing and you guess and you get the right answer. And you say, well, of course I'm right. I don't want to brag about it, but you knew I was right all along, didn't you? Yeah. Yeah, the ego loves it. So that keeps us identified with the ego if we're not aware of that process going on. It creates conflict. We look at our world today. We've got over 9 billion people living on this planet. And every one of them is right. Every one of them. I can guarantee you. Ask them. Anybody here, anybody on the street, are you right? Of course. How's that work? It doesn't, does it? It doesn't. It destroys intimacy. We can't have an intimate relationship with someone if we're always right. If they're always right. It's like that. That intimacy requires being open, questioning, being willing to learn, being willing to be wrong. I remember some years back when I was still married, a couples therapist, my wife and I were going to ask me the question of, Robert, would you rather be right or be married? I said, let me think about that. I'll get back to you next. But so often we would rather be right than have a friendship or have a relationship, because that separates us. Being right keeps us stuck in the past, and it hinders learning. You know, somebody that's always right will not learn anything. How can you learn anything if you're always right? There's no question, right? There's a quote, and I've shared this with you before. I don't know how long ago, but Eric Hoffer is an American philosopher, author. He says, in times of rapid change, the learners will inherit the earth, while the learned will find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. Mm-hmm. So you may be right, but you're right about something that's probably long gone dead. When we're right, we're not so concerned about being present in the moment. We're more concerned about being right. Sometimes I'll say, well, I'd rather be right or be awake. Let me think about that. Huh? So finding freedom. Some of the ways to find freedom. Be aware of mental states. That's very important. In other words, notice the climate, the weather report, if you will, of the mind. Notice when that sense of self-righteousness or that sense of rightness or better than-ness, that payoff, that little juice. Feel the body. Breathe, sense the body. That's always important. Being aware of the body, being aware of the mind states. Watch the story, watch the self-talk. That's huge. Just notice the story you're telling yourself. Have you ever told yourself a story when you're wrong, where you're wrong? I haven't. Even when I was wrong, I was right. You know, it's like there's a story of a drunk was driving down a freeway, turned on, he had a police radio. Police radio says, be careful, there's a car going the wrong way on I-70. The drunk looked around, he says, a car? He says, I see hundreds of them going around. That's the way we do it, isn't it? I'm not wrong. Everybody else is. So it's dangerous when we hold on to that view that I'm right. So play with the possibility of being wrong. Now, again, I'm not talking about it professionally. You know, if you're the next time you board an airplane and takes off, or you heard the pilot say, "Welcome aboard. I'd like you to know that I'm overcoming my addiction to being right. I don't have to know everything like I thought I did. Have a good flight." I don't think so. I don't care if he's addicted to being right. I want him to be right. So, and of course, that's necessary. But there are times when it's not necessary, when it works just the opposite. Being right does not serve us. There's a wonderful story, I think Jack Kornfield tells it, about his teacher, Ajahn Chah, who they had a group that lived in the forest in Thailand. And I guess there was an evangelical missionary set up a church just a little ways down the road. And he was converting many of the Buddhist monks to religion. They were becoming Jesus people. And one of the monks came up to Ajahn Chah and said, "Master," he says, "this church, this preacher down the road is stealing all of our monks. You know, maybe we might not have anybody that this keeps up. What are we going to do?" And Ajahn Chah thought for a moment, and he shrugged his shoulders and he says, "Well, you know, maybe they're right." Well, could I do that? Could I be that flexible and say maybe my competition is right? Realizing that right is always contextual. What time is it? What's the right answer? It's now? Yeah. Give me a number that matches the now. 10:51 or thereabouts. That's the right answer, right? But only if you're in where? The Central Time Zone, right? Sure. Is it summertime? Of course it's summertime, isn't it? Maybe, maybe not. It's not summer if you're in Australia, it's not summer. Or if you're on the moon, yeah. Here's a good one. Water freezes at 32 degrees, boils at 212, right?
That's pressure. That's standard pressure.
At sea level, it does. Yeah, if you go 10,000 miles, or 10,000 feet, I should say, up and to the top of a mountain, you'll find it boils at different temperature. You have to have separate recipes for baking a cake or whatever you say. So right is relative. And so knowing that you can be right and everybody else can be right at the same time. What's important is we can be right, looking, pointing for the same truth, because knowing the truth is far more important than being right. And so the ego is more concerned with being right. As we dedicate ourselves to knowing the truth and say that's more important. I may be right, I may be wrong, but if I know the truth, that's the only thing that really matters. So thank you for being part of this practice this week, and may all beings know the truth. The truth does indeed set them free. Thank you.